Hello everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to speak to you. My name's Tony Price. I'm the Head of Programme Innovation, Commercial Management and Sales at Trent and Dove Housing, and we are part of the Wychavon Consortium for the Decarbonisation Fund pilot project. What I'm going to talk to you today about is the delivery of a retrofit project, focusing particularly on rural delivery. This is the session outline of what I'm going to talk to you about. There's some brief introduction to the Wychavon Consortium and to Trent and Dove Housing. There's some background to the retrofit work that we actually did. Then some detail of how we delivered the project, focusing on how we work with our consultants, our contractors and our customers. Some challenges and how we manage them. And some learning points, and then I'm going to finish off by looking at it through a rural lens, looking at the rural dimension on this. One of the themes that you'll pick up as I go forward is that a lot of the issues and the learning affect both rural and urban areas equally, but there are some specific rural things which, as I'll pick up later in the presentation. Trent and Dove Housing. This is the corporate bit to keep our comms people happy. Trent and Dove Housing, we own and manage just over 6,200 homes in Staffordshire, Derbyshire, and a little bit in northwest Leicestershire. We're a stock transfer association, started operating in 2001. Currently G1V1. We had an in-depth assessment earlier on this year, which confirmed that rating. We have an active development programme of between 100 and 200 homes a year, and we contributed 32 properties to the decarbonisation pilot. Most of these were rural or rural-urban fringe, and they were predominantly off-grid, and that's just our website address there if you want to know a bit more about us. As I said, we were in the Wychavon Consortium, which consisted of Wychavon District Council. They were the lead local authority. And then there were 4 housing associations actually in the consortium. There was ourselves, Trident, Citizen and Rooftop, and we were joined by Orbit for the procurement stage of the project, but more about that in a moment. The consortium put about 200 properties into the pilot. We were supported by Savills, who were the lead consultants, and the contractors. We ended up with 3 contractors for the associations in the consortium. Sustainable Building Services UK, who were the contractor that Trent and Dove used. Waits and Lovells were the other 2. But a little bit about the actual work that's happened in the properties. I think the first thing to say is this work was undertaken with the residents in situ. We took a fabric first approach, so we were doing the things you would expect: external wall insulation, loft insulation, new roofs, new doors and windows, cavity wall insulation where it was needed, and also all the other structural bits and pieces to make that happen. For example, extending a roof line to accommodate external wall insulation, moving walls, external walls, lean-tos, meter cupboards. We had to cope with cat flaps, clearing out lofts, etc. So all the things that I'm sure you're familiar with. We did install mechanical ventilation in all of the properties. We didn't put in any new heating systems. We had originally looked at air source heat pumps, but in the tender stages those were prohibitively expensive, and also there was some significant supply chain issues, so we took the decision not to install those, but properties are air source heat pump ready, and that they're sort of well insulated. We put in a monitoring system. We used a system called the Switchy Smart Thermostat, probably aware of those, to help us monitor energy use pre and post works, and we're also using the more traditional sort of paper-based surveys and ringing up people and asking them questions about their energy use pre and post the work and their experience of the whole project. Just a quick word on timescales. Actual bid for the pilot was actually done in December 2020. Had a decision, I think it's February 21. We ran a procurement exercise over the spring and summer with 2021, with decisions actually made in August. Then we had the contract mobilisation, and the first works for consortium members actually started in November and ran through until September this year. The Trent and Dove element of those works commenced in January and were completed at the end of June. to look at actually what we did, how we delivered it. And again, none of this is particular rocket science, and you all probably do some or all of it. It's reasonably, sort of reasonably standard project management. But to take you through our experience, as I say, we had a number of consultants involved. The main consultants were Savills. We used SHRA for legal agreements, contracts, consortium agreements, etc. The other two main consultants we used were Acton Energy, who were energy advisor specialists, working with tenants and homeowners to advise them on what work's happening to the property, take them through the process and help them make the best use of what's installed. And I've already mentioned Switchy, who did the smart thermostat monitoring devices that provide us with information on usage. We also had surveyors involved as well, both to do initial surveys and then detailed surveys as the project went on. The PAS consultants, each contractor had their own M&E consultants and architects and engineers who they brought in as needed. The point I'm trying to make here, there were a lot of sort of moving parts with the consultants here. The way we govern the project, or the way the consortium worked, was that there'd be a project steering group with all of the consultants, the consortium members, and appointed the contractors on a monthly basis. There were also individual contract meetings with the contractors for the work they were doing with each of the housing associations. We did a procurement process via a dynamic purchasing system through the Procurement for Housing framework. After some discussion, we ended up splitting the consortium into two lots. Ourselves and Trident were one lot, Citizen and Rooftop with the other lot. This was based loosely on geography, but also on sort of property types and the actual work they needed doing. Orbit joined us at this stage for the procurement process. Savills had already been working with Orbit on another project, and it seemed sensible to bring them into the fold for the procurement process to give us a higher numbers and hopefully help us get a better price, which I think it did. We ended up with three main contractors, as I said: Lovells, Waits and Sustainable Building Services. Just for the detail, Trent and Dove and Trident had Sustainable Building Services. Citizen and Rooftop went with Waits, and Orbit used Lovells. There are a number of challenges with the procurement process, which I'm sure I don't need to spend too much time on, because you'll all have had these. So we had particular difficulty getting sufficient suitably qualified contractors to bid. We had to extend the procurement process twice, just because it was quite a small pond we were fishing in, and also there was some significant issues around ensuring that the supply chain was in place and giving ourselves assurance that the sort of supply chain was in place. But we got there. Last 2 points on the slide about delivering with the contractors is once we got the contracts mobilised, it was again reasonably standard project management, ongoing monitoring and progress meetings with both the consultants and the contractor, and then just the day-to-day issues around site management. I'll talk about resident liaison officer in a moment, but that really is a key role we found for delivering the contract. We had the next bit of the presentation is about delivering with customers, and again, none of this is rocket science, and you probably do all or some of it yourselves. But as I say, this is our experience. We did some initial contact by letter to tenants. We selected a pool of properties that we thought would benefit from these works as part of the bid. We wrote to people explaining what the project was and what it might mean and some of the potential benefits for them. We did quite a lot of briefing work with our customer services team so they could answer any questions when people rang up. We did some survey work initially, and again did some work with the surveyors so they could have informal discussions with residents about the various options. And we did various letters introducing Acton Energy so that they could be introduced to customers, so when they rang up they knew who they were. So there's quite a lot of sort of pre-work. We were doing this during the COVID lockdowns, which obviously added to the challenges. The one thing that I will probably say a few times, and I make no apology for it, is the importance of having a dedicated resident liaison officer working to the site manager to be that first point of contact for all the residents' queries. We insisted this was in the contract with SBS, although to be fair, I think that's something they would have done themselves anyway. And we made sure the RLO had all the right contacts within our business, customer services staff, tenancy management staff, repair staff, so that they could deal with any queries they got. And so we also did some work with our staff so they could deal with any tenant questions and concerns. Just as a slight side, as the programme got going, the biggest question we got asked was, why aren't I on the programme? So we had to have some answers to that. Continuing with the delivering with customers, as I said, once the works were in situ and being completed, we had some work around handovers, so explaining to residents exactly what had happened to their property and the benefits of it, and if there's any particular issues they needed to be aware of. We were lucky really in that the only thing with any moving parts, if you like, was the mechanical ventilation. So it was explaining to residents the benefits of that and the very low cost of that, and the fact they need to keep that running sort of 24/7. I think if we'd installed air source heat pumps or other heating systems, there might have been more education and sort of awareness needed. But we were sort of made sure that people, where they for example, couldn't drill a hole in the external wall insulation to hang a hanging basket or anything like that. So it was making sure people had that level of awareness. We also had to make sure that our staff internally had that level of awareness as well, so that when they're going out to do repairs on properties, that they don't sort of breach the measures we've put in there. To say we installed switches as well, the smart thermostats, and there's some literature around the use of those and what those were actually for, and the benefits of having those and the information they could provide to us. I think that's probably one area where we could have done a bit better. We could have done a bit more work with residents on what the switches were and how they were used. That was a comms issue for us, not a switch issue. Acton Energy also did some work with residents for us. That's basically telephone advice. I think they did a visit to each property as well, but it was basically a telephone advice service to take residents through the benefits of the work and what it might mean and how they could make the best use of it. And as with any contract, there was a defects management process which we managed through our customer services centre. In fact, the only defect I'm aware of, I think, is one issue with a lock on a new door. Not aware of any other issues to date. And as I said, we did some number of satisfaction surveys which are happening at the moment, both with Bays, the contractor, and we're doing some of our some internal ones as well. We have a louder and stronger campaign for resident engagement across the business, and we're using this as part of that. That's all great. There were a number of challenges, and I think it's important to spend a bit of time reflecting on those, because that's where the learning comes from. So, as I've alluded to, a lot of different players with different engagement levels at different times. So through the procurement process, we had to pull together the consortium members. We had to make sure that all the procurement rules were followed, all the contracts were in place, all the consortium agreements were in place, the various procurement documents were all published within the rules and regulations governing that. As we mobilised the contract, we had to have all the agreements with the contractor, and increasingly importantly with people like Acton Energy, so they could do the consultation they needed to do correctly. And we also need to keep tenants informed about the work at all stages. I think the key thing for me there is you need some internal ownership, either a project lead or a relatively senior member of staff who takes an overview of the project to make sure that all the moving parts move at the right time and in the right direction. We were fortunate in that Savills did a lot of the legwork on that for us as the lead consultant, but we also needed that internal ownership, which initially came via me internally, and it's now been taken up by our head of asset management. We needed to agree a whole range of legal agreements and contracts, as I've already alluded to, which was interesting to get everyone on the same page, if you'll pardon the pun, on those, particularly with data sharing. every organisation had a slightly different view on what data could be shared and how it could be shared, and we had to spend quite a lot of time making sure that the various data protection officers in each organisation were happy with it. That was quite frustrating, but we did actually get there. I think the lesson for that one is just to keep talking to each other, and don't underestimate the amount of time that it takes to get what is basically a very simple agreement sorted out within your own organisation and with other organisations. COVID was clearly a challenge. We delayed the procurement process, and to a lesser extent the mobilisation. We also had the very real issues of reassuring tenants that they'd be safe working in their homes, so we had to make sure that people had the right PPE, that they had safe working spaces, etc. Quite a lot of the work, the external wall insulation, that sort of thing, was done externally, so that wasn't so much of an issue. But obviously any work within somebody's house needed to take account of any COVID restrictions at the time. Supply chains, I won't talk about too much. That was a major issue. I think we had shortages of everything at some point, and we just had to make sure that was built into the contract, and SPS did really well to procure all the relevant bits at the right time. But again, there was some challenges there. The challenges around expertise were particularly around the PASS scheme, and having enough qualified people available to do that sort of technical and specialist stuff when it was needed. I've mentioned that we're working with residents in situ, and that brings its own challenges and needs careful management. Which again, particularly where the resident liaison officer comes in to be able to walk people through what's happening to them and their property, and how they can deal with any issues and the benefits they're going to get from it. And also we needed to keep residents engaged and informed over quite a long period of time, including times when really nothing much from their point of view was happening. So, for example, we had to keep people informed during a lengthy procurement process with a message that we are looking to procure somebody to do some work on your property. There are some issues with this. We are doing our best. However, we can't give you a definite date when work will start, etc. And again, the lesson for that is just keep talking to people and try and manage their expectations. And finally, the final challenge was weather. It did affect some of the external works. For example, again, as people know, can only put rendering on within certain temperatures or within certain humidity levels, and obviously working through the autumn and the winter, that did cause some challenges. But again, just need to make sure those are factored in. He said that there are a number of learning points from our experience. I think it's gone pretty well. But clearly, if we had our time again, there are some things we would do differently with partner organisations and customers. Tongue in cheek, don't do it during a pandemic, and don't have an energy crisis halfway through the process. But those are things we can do a little about. The things we can influence a bit more are, as with most things in life, pick your partners carefully and keep communicating to them. Keep talking. We're very lucky. We had a very SPS. We're a very good contractor, very amenable, and very willing to work with us. And we also had good support from Savills and the other consultants as well. Have a dedicated full-time lead, as I said, whether that's an in-house lead or a consultant to help you with this. But you do need someone to sort of own this and push you through the business. Clear lines of communication with all parties, particularly, as I say, we're in a consortium with 4, 5, if you count all of it for the procurement process. Other associations, we had the consultants, we had the local authority, having to keep the BAE's monitoring requirements going as well, keeping them informed about progress of the scheme. And the other learning point there is working with everybody, consultants, but everybody, contractors, and within your business, on the best message and managing expectations of staff, tenants and partners. A couple of things sort of coming out of that. I think that we need a residents champion. Learning continued to be pragmatic and flexible on data sharing and lead agreements. As I've already said, some of the legal agreements can become quite quite onerous or quite difficult to sort out, and it's being pragmatic and flexible with those while protecting your position. Have clear information available for tenants and staff, whether that's on an intranet or through paper-based copies or hyperlinks or whatever. Probably need a range of resources for tenants and staff to do that. We found having a mix of paper copy and hyperlinks work quite well for people who had different levels of engagement with IT. Get information on properties that you've done work on and what work you've done, updated on your asset management systems and customer service systems, so that when staff have to book future work or answer any questions, they know that 123 High Street was part of the decarbonisation project and has had these things done to it. Again, quite a basic thing, but just making sure that data flows through the business. I've talked a couple of times about how vital a resident liaison officer role is, and I'll say it again, absolutely key role to be that conduit for information both to and from the tenants. If I did it again, I'd probably try and have a tenant champion, somebody who'd been through the process before, who said yes, it's disruptive, but the benefits of this and this. And we've fortunate enough to have a couple of residents who from the pilot who we'll be using for any future works, who are almost evangelical about the positive benefits the work has had on their properties and their energy bills. And the final sort of learning point is to develop a process for staff. So at the void process, they know that it's there's specific works happen to this property. They need to not drill holes through wall insulation and things like that, but also be able to provide that information to the new tenants at the relet time. Again, not so much of an issue for us, but particularly important for things like air source heat pumps, or where there's new heating systems that need specific instruction. So I'd say a little bit about the specific rural challenges. As I said, most of the challenges in learning are pretty universal and apply equally to rural and urban sites. They did come up against some specific rural issues, and we had to work through these. I'll just spend a moment or two on those. Again, as you probably know from experience, several sites. There were several site issues. Sites tend to be smaller in rural areas, more difficult to access, both physically access and also getting road access to. And we needed to do things like find enough space for material storage, a site office, welfare facilities, and parking for contractors and site visitors. Overcame that in a combination of ways. We used some of our garage sites. We had one site office stroke material store for several sites that were clustered in a village, and we liaised and came to agreements with local village and community halls for parking, which worked quite well. One of the other specific rural challenges was around work planning. Obviously, with a smaller number of homes in that work done in rural areas, need to plan work carefully. I mean, we literally had cases where there was literally a 10-minute job on one property and then half an hour's drive to the next job. So the work scheduling became very important, and again, that was down to having a very good site manager and clear monitoring at those monthly site meetings. We didn't have any particular issues with mixed tenure, although in some rural areas where there's been a lot of property sold under the right to buy, for example, or where there's many more mixed tenure estates, then that could be an issue. We had a couple of semi-detached houses where we did work where we owned half and we owned one and the other one was privately owned, and we had to do some communication work with homeowners on that and party wall and that sort of thing. That's going to be an issue going forward, I think, for all retrofit programs dealing with that mixed tenure approach. And the final sort of rural issue we had was that not spot issues with technology. What I mean by that is, for example, the switchy devices work on a mobile telephone link and an internet link, and rural broadband can be poor stroke non-existent in some areas. So we had to sort of work through that. And where we've tried to resolve that with switchy is install a slightly different form of unit, which has got a roaming SIM. rather than a fixed sim, which will hopefully help address that problem. That is it from me. Thank you very much for your time. My contact details are there. If you want to ask questions, please do drop me an email and I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much for listening.